Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And folks, the Phillies, they're back in the win column. A short 3-game losing streak is ended by the series-ending win in San Francisco. So we'll break down how that happened. Also, some benches cleared in San Fran, which was weird. A lot of stuff to talk about from this road trip. We're going to get into what we should learn from this West Coast road trip and a rough stretch by the Philadelphia Phillies. So we kind of temper our expectations going forward maybe a little bit, and we'll take a peek in at the standings because we haven't looked at those in a minute, and Phil's have an off day. So, hey, why not see how far ahead they are from basically every other team in baseball. Yeah, a lot to get into on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm Connor Thomas, your host. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. And today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. The Philadelphia Phillies are heading from coast to coast as they come back from their West Coast road trip, heading out of San Francisco with a win in the final game of the series against the Giants. Now, they did lose the series. They've lost 2 straight series. They lost 3 straight games at one point on this road trip. And they finish the 6 games, 3 in Colorado, 3 in San Fran, with a record of 2-4. That's not great. Considering the competition, considering how good this Phillies team is, how much of a role they were on, that's honestly a disappointment to have that looked at when everything's all said and done. Here's kind of the way that I look at it. We're going to dive deeper into this a little bit later in the show, but it's you won 2 games. You lost a 0-0 extra innings game, 1-0. You lost the game on the final pitch. Or you would have won a game in Colorado, but Jose Alvarado gave up a home run on the final pitch of the game, or like the final out. You understand what I'm trying to say. 2 outs. Alvarado gives up a homer to tie it. Bryce Harper was also ejected early from that game like crazy. Like, it was just a weird trip. We'll get into that more coming up. But let's talk about the game yesterday, because the first thing we need to do is we need to acknowledge that Nick Castellanos had a great game. I literally just did the segment on Nick Castellanos yesterday, or maybe it wasn't a full segment, but yesterday's episode, I talked about why people aren't talking about Nick Castellanos as much as the fan base is when they're very critical of him, and why, oh, well, things aren't changing, so what do you want me to tell you? And his approach at the plate needs to change, and that's just on him. So there's not much of a conversation there. Well, yesterday, Nick Castellanos went out and went 3 for 5, 2 runs scored, 2 RBIs, went yard, was a triple shy of the cycle. He was absolutely awesome in yesterday's game. That's great to see. I don't know if it translates into anything because he's had moments like this throughout the year where he'll have a good game. He just can't string them together all that much. He's only batting .208. It's not really a great number there, but he's above the Mendoza line for the time being. And maybe this sparks something. Maybe the warm weather gets him going. Maybe this is the start of a hot stretch. We know he's a streaky hitter. Now, this year has gone beyond like kind of streaky. He's just been flat out not good enough at the plate, but maybe this will heat him up. We will see. But it's a great game by Nick Castellanos yesterday. A huge reason the Philadelphia Phillies won that ball game. For everyone out there who's anti-Nick Castellanos, or maybe not even anti-Nick Castellanos, but has been very critical of him this year, I don't think you've been crazy to have been critical, but it can't be a one-sided conversation. When he goes out and has a great game that helps you win, we need to celebrate that. I don't root for the Philadelphia Phillies except for Nick Castellanos. I root for the Philadelphia Phillies, and you as a fan should as well. And when Nick Castellanos plays for this team, you can be critical of him, but when he does something well, it's helping the team you want to win. So this is a good thing, folks, and we can celebrate that. So a great game by Nick Castellanos yesterday. Kyle Schwarber also had himself a nice afternoon. 2 for 4 at the plate, 2 RBIs, a leadoff home run to set the tone, like right off the bat. You get Kyle Schwarber off of Kyle Harrison, just takes him deep. And welcome back to the team that you face in your debut, kid. It's not going too well for Harrison. Actually, he's 4-2, so he's kind of figured some stuff out. But my point is that is a rude awakening for a guy who's newer to Major League Baseball and had debuted this year. It's a great way to start the game, and it kind of made you feel good after the Phillies go 10 innings without scoring a run on Tuesday. On Wednesday, they start that game with an immediate home run. And that's why Kyle Schwarber's great as a leadoff hitter sometimes. He makes you uncomfortable from first pitch. So the offense, that was basically the story. I mean, those guys counted for 5 hits, but the Phillies, they had 14 hits. So let's just give some love to some other guys who contributed. We're going to talk about Bryce Harper plenty. He had a hit late in the game. Alec Boehm had a hit and a run scored. He also had a walk. Bryson Stott, 2 for 5. Nice. Garrett Stubbs, 2 for 4, and also had a rocket line drive that was caught by the second baseman. He could have easily been 3 for 4. 2 for 4 from Garrett Stubbs. Love to see it. 2 for 4 from Christian Pache. Love to see it. 1 for 4 from Whit Merrifield. Love to see that as well. Merrifield and Stubbs also both walked in the game. This team is very deep, and their depth are going to be guys that, by comparison, do not look like good enough, right? If you look at Whit Merrifield and you say, oh, he hasn't been good enough this year, I get it. You need to understand what other teams in baseball are trotting out there in that position. If you look at Garrett Stubbs and say he hasn't been good enough, you're comparing him to maybe the best catcher in baseball, has been for a while, JT Realmuto. And the Phillies do fine when he's out there. He doesn't exactly put up great numbers, but the Phillies aren't losing every game Garrett Stubbs catches. So just an overall great team performance, 14 hits, 6 runs. Phillies did have an error made in the game. Whatever. It's okay. It's all good. Not worried about it. That is the bounce back performance that makes you feel like this Phillies team is going to be okay. So that was the offense. The offense was kind of the highlight because the pitching has been good on this road trip. They just haven't gotten run support. That being said, we do also have to talk about how good the pitching was yesterday because Cristopher Sanches was awesome. We talked about the decision between Spencer Turnbull and Cristopher Sanches and who should be in the rotation and why now that may shift to a Taijuan Walker conversation, but Cristopher Sanches has not done anything to prove the Phillies incorrect with the decision they made. Well, Sanches went out yesterday and again looked great. He went 6 innings. He allowed 4 hits, no runs, walked 1, struck out 7, looked dominant, worked out of a bit of a jam in the middle innings, had bases loaded and struck a guy out. I mean, his breaking stuff was really, really good yesterday. His changeup was nasty, and I really like what Cristopher Sanches has put together as far as this season. I put a tweet out about this yesterday during the game. In any other rotation, Cristopher Sanches and what he's doing this year, I mean, he's got a 2.83 ERA. He's 3-3, but win-loss isn't really highly touted anymore. But a 2.83 ERA as a starter, in any other rotation in baseball, or a lot of other rotations, I should say, that would be a shining bright spot of, wow, this dude is really stepping up. In this rotation, it's just keeping pace with guys like Wheeler and Ranger Suarez and Nola at some points, but that doesn't mean it's not any more impressive. And I don't fault people for not noticing it because the bar is set so high by Philadelphia Phillies pitchers this year. But Cristopher Sanches has been awesome. He was awesome yesterday. I hope he continues to do that. He's really coming into his own. I think it's a major benefit in a couple of ways for Cristopher Sanches to be in this rotation as a young pitcher trying to figure it out at the major league level. He's had a couple seasons, but he's still trying to come into his own. On one hand, you have a really great staff around you, which means normally if you're going to be taking them out, you're going to be building momentum off of the previous day's start. You just watch someone else go out and shut down a team. Now it's your turn to go get them. And you feel like you got to raise your performance. You have that natural motivation. Not that these guys aren't normally motivated, but you have that natural motivation to go out there and shove. And that helps. But also, being the 5th starter in the rotation, you don't have the pressure that comes with being if you had done this, if you're Cristopher Sanches and had 2.83 ERA on a different team where you were the 5 maybe starting, but now it's just wow, well, you've been maybe our best pitcher. There becomes pressure to be that guy continually. There's no pressure for Cristopher Sanches, or very minimal, because you have Wheeler, you have Suarez, you have Nola. He is an afterthought with this rotation. That sometimes makes it easier to adjust. So I don't hate at all the situation he's in, and I love the performance he's put together. And I love that the Phillies won yesterday. There's one thing from the game that I don't love, and it's Skylar Harrison throwing up and in on Bryce Harper and so many other guys. Here is the conversation that needs to happen about the benches clearing brawl. All right? Well, brawl. There was no brawl, except Pat Burrell started shoving people. He's currently an assistant coach for the San Francisco Giants. Like, Pat, whose side are you on, my guy? But Bryce Harper gets 2 up and in. He's chirping. The bench is empty, but nobody really made any type of movement towards anybody. Harper was just kind of standing there and staring down Harrison. It just kind of ended up with everybody walking out of the field for no reason and warnings issued. And Harper said after the game, he's like, I just don't like him throwing up and in. I don't think it was intentional. It's just like, this is the majors. You throw too hard to go up and in on guys that are worth this much money and this important to the team and everything. This level of play is expected. He's a young kid. And now, did Harper overreact a little bit? Maybe a little bit, yeah. Do I understand where he's coming from? Yeah, and if you've ever had 90+ up and in on you, you'd understand as well. It's not fun. I've never worn one, but I've seen that up and close and personal, and it's not fun. So I get it. I just think it was a whole lot of nothing. And I think Bryce Harper was very frustrated at points. He had a ground ball he didn't run out after that at bat that probably he should have ran it out. But it's just like frustrating day for Bryce Harper. I don't know if he tweaks something or if he's just trying to find out how he can play better. Whatever the case may be, I'm not looking any deeper into that. Just kind of frustrations over the course of the baseball season. Happens to everybody. We move on. We see how they look when they take on the Cardinals on Friday. In tomorrow's episode, we're going to be previewing all of that. But coming up next, we're going to talk about what we should learn from this West Coast road trip, because it was a weird one, not typical of what we've seen from the Phillies this year. What does it mean? Well, I'll explain it to you coming up next. First, I got to explain to you why Supply House is amazing. You got to get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. So you know how to use what you get, what to get, like all of that stuff is right there. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. I didn't even know there were that many brands in those spaces. They got them. They got all of them. And get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Sounds like a great deal to me. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM, TM for Trade Master, and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right, let's talk about this road trip because, again, I've said it a couple times. Kind of weird. Very strange road trip. Colorado, the Phillies didn't really create opportunities to score as much as you should. Didn't really hit homers the way you'd expect them to with the high altitude and everything like that. San Francisco, the Phillies win yesterday, breaks a 9-game losing streak in that building. That team hasn't been all that good the whole time you've been playing them during that streak. They haven't played them well since like 2014 out on the road, and you just swept that team at Citizens Bank Park over 4 games. So it's just like kind of what happened and what do we learn? Well, here's something that Phillies fans need to come to terms with, okay? We have some PTSD from the NLCS last year. I think it actually stems from the World Series the year before, watching the Philadelphia Phillies get no hit by the Houston Astros on the biggest stage in baseball. I think it's just like, my God, when this team goes cold, they choke away in big spots. And then you see the NLCS for game 6 and 7, the offense falls apart. Nobody at the top of the lineup or really in the lineup at all can hit. And you end up going home because of it to what was a lesser opponent on paper. Diamondbacks were the better team in that series. But I think people see that and then they say every time you see the Phillies go through a cold stretch, it's like, this is what they're going to do in October. First of all, every October is different. Every postseason in baseball is different. All you can do, and I'm going to continue to just hammer away at this case until people actually listen and believe it. All you can do is deliver a team talented enough to win the World Series, that has played a good enough regular season to make you believe they can win the World Series. That's all you can do. And you know what's going to happen? There's going to be some great team. It might be the Yankees. It might be the Dodgers. It might be the Phillies. It could be any of these great teams in baseball right now. One of them's going to get to the postseason. Maybe two of them. Maybe all of them are going to get to the postseason, and somebody's going to go cold. Not just a player. An offense is going to go cold. And unfortunately, that's going to be the reason a great team is sent home against a lesser team. That's going to happen regardless of whether we freak out about it in May or not. So what we just need to come to terms with is, in baseball, you're going to go through stretches where the offense slumps. Even the best teams do it. Nobody goes 162-0. No one even comes close. 116 is the record for wins. So that means, you're still losing a good number of baseball games, folks. And I look at that and I say, oh, okay, now what do we learn from this? What draws can we take away? Because it wasn't time to panic. I know I titled the episode yesterday as Time to Be Concerned, kind of a little clickbaity on that one, because I was explaining why you shouldn't be concerned, but I think a lot of Phillies fans were voicing some frustration rather. So I talked about that in yesterday's episode. If you want to go hear my explanation, while the Phillies were still on this losing streak yesterday, you can hear that. But what we learned from the road trip is this team is still capable, when they struggle, of putting together any given day a game that makes you feel like you're watching the Philadelphia Phillies that had the best 50-game start in franchise history. Like, watch it. If you took yesterday's game and made it the first game of this road trip following, I'm trying to remember who they played before they, when they swept out the Rangers. That was the last team they played at home, and then they went on this road trip. Like, if you had put this game as the first game, the Friday night game after beating the Rangers on Thursday in that day game, we would have said, hey, same old stuff from the Philadelphia Phillies. They just keep rolling. So it wasn't like they forgot how to play. They just went through a slump. So maybe that is a word of caution for everybody out there to do that. What else we learned? The pitching it's just going to be this good. They are. Even when the Philadelphia Phillies are not playing well, it's rarely going to be because of the pitching. Think about it. Zach Wheeler yesterday threw a shutout performance. 2 days ago, threw a shutout performance. You went into the 10th inning without allowing a run. Now, you gave up one in the 10th, the ghost runner, but no earned runs in that whole game. Like, that's outstanding. You basically almost shut out the Giants for 18 straight innings. Pretty darn good. You held the Colorado Rockies down. Not that they're a great offense. I mean, you didn't really give up too much to the Giants in game one. There might be blow-up performances. We saw them from Taijuan Walker earlier in the series. There might be individuals that struggle, but it's going to be very rare that the reason you go on a losing streak is because the pitching staff isn't holding up their end of the bargain. That's great to know, because pitching is what wins you championships, and the Philadelphia Phillies have it in spades. What have we learned about the defense? Maybe it's not as good as we thought. I felt pretty comfortable in the defense going into this West Coast road trip, like before they headed out to Colorado and San Francisco. And now I look at it and I say, maybe I was overvaluing it because the team itself is just so good. And I think they can overcome average defense, which is what I see this team as. I thought there might be slightly above average. I'm kind of rescinding that a little bit, or I'm tentative to say that at this point in my mind. It's not a killer, but it's something to keep an eye on. I'm going to watch that for the next couple weeks and see, do I have other questions about the defense as the team continues to progress through their schedule? And then base running wise, they're always going to be a bad base running team, but they're going to be aggressive. And that's kind of something you have to take, and that's true to form still, even as they struggle. So these are all the characteristics of what makes this Phillies team who they are. And one of those things, the reason why they slump, is just kind of an accepted nature of baseball type of reason with even the best team slump. So no reason to be concerned. They're come back. They play the Cardinals. We're going to preview that series on tomorrow's episode. Hopefully they'll roll, get back into winning series. They're fine. They're totally fine. Just a learning experience, and it's a learning experience for the team as well. Coming up next, as we wrap up, we're going to take a peek at the standings. We haven't done this in a minute. I've mentioned it a time or two here and there, maybe just like looking at where they're at as far as best team in baseball or whatever. But let's take an actual deeper dive into the NL East standings, the National League standings, everything that you need to know about the Philadelphia Phillies. So we'll get into that coming up as we wrap up today's episode. But before we do that, I got to tell you about FanDuel because it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers are going to get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, plenty more. You could bet on like futures, you could put together parlays, all kinds of stuff available on FanDuel. Basically, every bet you can think of, you can find it on FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count. Or if you don't want to do the playoffs, maybe the lights are too bright for you there, regular season baseball, great thing to bet on. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. Go ahead and check them out. All right, the standings. This is the fun part of this episode because a lot of this episode so far has been rationalizing what you've seen on the West Coast trip and talking about how this team is still good, but you kind of have to just like continue to have faith in them because they haven't showed it over the past 6 games or whatever. Like yesterday was a fun game. The West Coast trip was not fun overall. And yet, let's start with the overall standings for Major League Baseball because the Philadelphia Phillies at 39-18. By the way, they're 6-4 in their last 10 games. They've still gone 2 games over 100. 2 games over 500 in their last 10, despite having probably their worst stretch of the year so far. They're a game up on the Yankees. Their run differential is the best in baseball by 1 run. Like they're plus 93. The Yankees are plus 92. Like this team is still very clearly the top dog right now when it comes to Major League Baseball overall. So there's nothing to worry about at all. When you look at the National League standings, the Phillies are 3.5 games up on the Dodgers for top seed in the National League. The Dodgers are 36-22, 621 winning percentage. The Phillies 684 winning percentage, 63 points higher than what the Dodgers currently have. I mean, the run differential is 11 runs higher. This team is the best team in the National League. Obviously, they're the best team in baseball. That means they're the best team in the National League. But there's a pretty still sizable gap between them and the Los Angeles Dodgers. And we're not even talking about the division yet. Looking at the division, the Phillies have a 6-game lead over the Atlanta Braves right now. The Braves have been struggling. They're 5-5 in their last 10. 500 ain't going to make up ground on the Philadelphia Phillies, and they got ground to make up. Losing Acuna, losing Strider makes it significantly harder. And the Phillies at 39-18, the Braves at 31-22. This is just a situation where what the Philadelphia Phillies need to do is they need to play like honestly, over 10 games, if they just go 6-4 the rest of the way, they're probably going to win the division. It's going to take the Braves to get hot, which they could do. There's still a long way to go. There's still 100+ games to go. But if the Phillies just keep going like 2 games over 500 every 10 games, they're going to finish the season like, I don't know, 35, 40 games above 500. That's going to be pretty darn good considering they're already 21 games above 500. I don't have any issue with that whatsoever. I don't think anybody should have any issue with that whatsoever. My math could be a little bit off as far as how many games over they would be if they kept doing that. But the point is, you've given yourself such a buffer, and Atlanta's taken such a big hit with injuries, you don't really have to do anything that crazy. And that's what we have to remember the rest of the way. Ultimately, the regular season doesn't mean squat. Losing those games in Colorado, losing those games in San Francisco, they're annoying at the time. You focus on the standings. You want to continue to build that buffer. But at the end of the day, it's not going to make a difference as long as you win the division and if you become one of the top 2 seeds in the National League, which I think the Philadelphia Phillies are going to absolutely be, you're fine. And then all that matters is what you do in October. So deep breath, everybody. We're all good. We'll talk about the Cardinals series tomorrow on our Friday episode, but thank you so much for checking us out. That's our that's our last thing to say, but that's all for our episode. So please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.